Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well today and that everyone can hear me as well. We have first just a little bit of housekeeping. I have opened up the chat screen, so as you have questions along the way, and then as we get to points where there are some questions for us to think about and consider, you'll have an opportunity to do that as well. So to get us started, again, welcome this morning to our master class, which is Understanding Professional Pathways. This is another opportunity for professionals in our knowledge community to get a little more insight that helps them in their professional growth and development. As I said a moment ago, I have opened up the chat window so you're able to type in your questions that you may have, as well as any other items that you may want to put in the chat. Okay, to get us started, let me go ahead and pull up here and get our presentation rolling. And essentially, my hope is that we will be able to spend about 30 minutes or so going through some of the items and then being able to get to some of the questions that you may have. So to get us started, let's do a quick introduction of who I am. So I am Gina Lee Olakoya, and in this capacity with the knowledge community, I serve as the coordinator of the master class. But I'm also currently Associate Dean of Students at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And some of the things that I've previously done, or I've worked at Wichita State University as the director of the Center for Student Leadership, and previously at Illinois State in Student Life. And then I started my professional career at Longwood College as a coordinator of Greek Affairs. And so hopefully through some of these experiences, I'll be able to share a little insight that we have that hopefully you'll be able to take with you along on your journey as well. So my plan for our time today is to engage in a dialogue around your career journey. What is it that you're hoping to do with your career, and how will you be able to get from where you are right now to the next position in student affairs, or the next position that you may be thinking that might be not in student affairs but in another higher education capacity. We'll talk a little bit about some professional tools for your career and how you can navigate those. And then we'll discuss how you can design a professional development plan, how you might be able to connect with some others in the field and chart your own path for your career development. So a couple of things that I want us to be able to do right now is to take a pause and for you to think about 3 questions that I've identified. These 3 reflective questions, because they are really the start in any conversation about how can you navigate your career. The first question is to think about your professional goals. So what I'm asking you to do is to think about and identify 3 professional goals that you have currently. And then to identify 3 aspects of your current position that you enjoy doing. What do you do right now in your current position that you absolutely love, that excites you every day, that really gets you out of the bed, and makes you want to come to work, that you have found your joy and your passion in? Think about what those 3 things might be. And then I want you to think about 3 professional stretch goals. So what goals do you have for yourself as a professional that are stretched, things that you've never done before, things that you've thought about maybe wanting to do, but you currently don't do them now, aspects of your professional goals or competencies that you feel that you want to stretch and to gain a better insight on. So let's take a moment to think, have a little reflection about those. And then if any of you want to just go ahead and type in the screen, maybe a response to each of these so we know what y'all are thinking out there. So we'll take a moment. So as you've thought about some of those, if anyone would like to share, I mean, what have you thought about maybe a reflection on the first one, identifying some professional goals that you have currently? And I've opened up the chat window. So would anyone like to share any thoughts on some of the aspects about your current position that you enjoy, that brings energy to you? So for those of us who have just joined us, we're asking a reflective question here. So for those of us who have just joined us, we're asking a reflective question here. And so for those of us who have just joined us, we're asking a reflective. So what we are talking about now is this idea of identifying 3 professional goals that you have currently, identifying aspects of your career that you have that you really enjoy, that bring energy to you, and then identifying some stretch goals. And if you would like to respond, you can type into the chat, and I should be able to get that, and we can roll with that question. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. So if you have a time to think about that, again, I think it's important to have any conversation about your professional journey that outlines these 3 reflective questions. So if you want to give some thought to those as you're moving along. So again, from my perspective, I think that a conversation about your professional journey really begins with this concept of your professional philosophy. And many of us have, talked about this and have worked through it, but it's really kind of this idea that you have a professional philosophy that's your approach that provides the anchor. Your professional philosophy is your anchor because it provides consistency. It helps you to make emotion-free decisions. It's intentional and it provides clarity of your purpose. And so what I like to always challenge, not only myself, but the professionals that I get to work with, is to try to identify early on what your professional philosophy is, and know that that professional philosophy will change throughout your career. But all of us should be able to have some idea about how we roll. What is it that we would like to clarify about our own professional values? How are we being consistent? What do we value most in the things that we work on, and how we approach the work that we do with our colleagues and the work that we do with our students? To be able to think reflectively about whatever your professional philosophy is now helps you to identify how you're going to move through your career. One of the things that I wish I had had early on in my own career was a better sense of who I was as a professional. And some of those things got clarified as I moved on, but I think reflectively now into my first position that I had a better sense of what were some of the things that I thought were negotiables and non-negotiables about my own professional journey and my own philosophy about how I approached my work. That would have been a value add in my first position right out of grad school. So for consideration, I've put a couple of thoughts up that I think might be important. One is, what are important professional characteristics that you possess? So as you're thinking about how do you develop this professional philosophy which guides you, think about what your current professional characteristics are. What are they? Outline them so that you have a starting point. Then how would you define the core of your professional identity? How would you define what makes you unique in your profession? What makes you unique in your job and your approach? What is it that folks can identify and you can identify as the core of who you are as a professional? I like to think that I'm a student of my profession, and so that's what I like to do. I like to spend a lot of time reading and learning and engaging with materials, and then trying to figure out how to apply them to my work. And yes, I think I was that professional who right out of grad school, when I'm designing my first program, I pulled out my theory book and I was wondering, how does my program fit in with Chickering's theory, and how are we going to get students through these vectors, through these these programs. And I use that as an example because that's really where I was, and to some degree describes a little bit of who I am today as a professional as well. I was very eager and anxious to apply the knowledge that I had learned and thought that that was a good professional characteristic to have. So for you, think about your own identity. What is at the core of your professional identity? And then finally, something to think about as you're processing this idea of your professional philosophy is, how do you envision your professional philosophy completing your current and future positions and within your organization? So how do you envision your professional philosophy? How does it work within your organization now? And then how will it work in your organization later? So if you are thinking about your own professional philosophy, you want to be able to always determine, how is your philosophy, your approach, how you roll, how is that going to map up to the positions that you will have in the future and the position that you have now? So any discussion about where you're going to go in the field, how are you going to get there, really starts with this idea of, what is your professional philosophy? How do you define yourself? The next step as we start thinking through navigating our career really is about establishing your professional identity. That really goes along with the idea of your professional philosophy, but your professional identity is really key too in determining, what you plan to do next. What are your current work habits? And then how do those habits need to improve, or how do you enhance those habits? What are your practices? Early on in your career, we're learning how to balance the multiple tasks and projects that we have been given to us. And to some degree, we're really excited about doing some of the work that we're doing. For our first year grad students, this is you're probably wrapping up your first semester, and the semester has ended and you can reflect on how that went. And you're pretty still excited about the things that you have left on your plate to do and the things that you want to do. And newer professionals, I think we always get into the situation where we as new professionals want to be able to do almost everything. And so establishing your professional identity is going to be key, because it's an opportunity for you to think about your own interests, what you believe in, your own values, how you want to work, whatever those habits are, those practices that you have. You want to be able to have a clear professional identity. And early on, to be able to establish that along with your professional philosophy, I think will aid you in being successful in your current positions, and also thinking about, how do you get to the next position? How are you going to continue to navigate your career? You want to be able to learn skills and lessons early on so that they can benefit you in the future. So if you're one of those professionals like I was, who would say yes to every additional project and every additional assignment because it sounded really interesting, and I was always a joiner and I like to do things, you might want to be a little bit more reflective about how that fits into your own identity and your professional philosophy, so that you can certainly be an engaged and active professional throughout your time in your organization. So being reflective about establishing your professional identity, I think, is key to navigating your career. The identity and your philosophy are links together, and so I hope that you would be able to spend some time thinking about some of those. So as you're thinking about your career and this idea that we're navigating and understanding our professional pathways, it's inevitable that we come to a conversation about, what kinds of skills do we need to have? And developing key skills are important. One of the things that I was able to do this year was to ask colleagues what did they see were key skills for new professionals and for professionals who are completing their master's program. So I was able to get a core group of folks who serve at mid-level positions as senior student affairs officers and faculty members to talk to me a little bit about what they think are some key skills that we should be developing. And so we will have an opportunity in the spring to flesh out more of these skills, to hone in on that in some other masterclass opportunities. But I want to share with you, as you're thinking about this career path and navigating your career path, that developing certain skills I think will be critical. And some of those skills that were identified by these colleagues are planning. Being able to think critically, strategic planning, and to have that skill is a skill that's going to be very important at all levels of the profession. So whether or not you are a new professional or mid-level, this idea of being able to plan and to think strategically is a skill that you will need to have and to start developing early on. Assessment without question. Everybody knows that assessment is a skill that we should have. As resources become limited and as you progress through your career, you'll understand that we'll always be asked to demonstrate our effectiveness. We will be asked to demonstrate, how does student affairs work? How do we manage to be a part of the total student experience, and why does that matter? Across campus, everyone will ask, why does student affairs matter? And what is our contribution to student learning? So to be able to think about assessment every step of the way is going to be critical. And assessment is actually a skill that I know is emerging in our graduate programs, that more courses are being offered around that. But if you have an opportunity to enhance that skill and to develop it, not only through a class, but to get on projects where you can practice assessment, that's going to be key. Fundraising and development. That is going to be a key skill too for your career as you're navigating through, to be able to engage with others, to talk about what you do, to have that elevator speech, just in case you happen to have a donor who won the lottery and decides that they want to give $1 million of their lottery earnings to you for your fabulous program. We need to be able to identify what makes us unique, what makes your programs unique, and to be able to sell that. That's going to become everyone's responsibility, not just a chief fundraiser or someone from the advancement office. It will become everyone's responsibility. This idea of practice and review of student development. Now, I shared with you the example of my own first experience with in my first career position, where I wanted to make sure that I was hitting all the points with regards to student development. And this will continue throughout our careers to be important as well, that we understand student development, student identity development. There will be new knowledge added to what we currently know about students, the student experience, how they experience college, how do they experience interacting with others, how do they experience ideas of integrating with different cultures and with other different competencies. This will be important for us, not only the classics, but to engage with new theories that are being written, and for us to even think about how we can contribute to those new theories and those new ideas about student development. Budget and fiscal management. If you have the opportunity to do that now, this is great. If you are not in a position where you are able to do fiscal management and to work on budgets, then try to get some of those experiences, talking to your supervisor to be able to get them, or going to trainings and classes, because those will be key moving forward. To be able to learn to do that skill effectively will be important as you move on. And then there's some other core competencies that colleagues have identified that are important in developing your skills so that you can be successful in your career. Cultural competencies, supervision and management, collaborations and partnerships. And so supervising and managing staff will be significant. Learning how to do that effectively will certainly benefit you as you're moving through your career. It's a key skill to have. Cultural competency, a key skill to have. And ever more today as our students come to our campuses from different places, from the United States to outside the United States, to international students, to students who are veteran students. We have lots of different students to identify in multiple ways. And for us to be culturally competent will be significant. For us to be relevant in a conversation about how to support students in our student experience, we will need to be culturally competent. And this idea of collaborations and partnerships. On some campuses, that's easier said than done. But to be able to approach our work with the spirit of collaboration and understanding that there are partnerships that we can advance will be significant too, particularly as there are limited resources on many college campuses. How do we collaborate and partner with others across campus? How do we partner with others within our division? These will be critical skills to learn to navigate and finesse, but to start practicing to get them. So as we're talking about developing these key skills, they're not skills that I think happen right away, or that we have them and we successfully are able to do them. They take practice. And so one of the lessons that I want folks to always take away in their career is that every skill takes practice. And the more you practice them, the more successful you'll be with them. And that will help you be successful in your career journey as you're charting your path forward and as you're identifying what will be the next steps in your career. Another element in our navigating our career path is this idea of networking. Everyone has probably heard network, 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 and that is true. To advance your network is very important. Starting with your peers, it's significant. Engaging in your professional groups. Now, this doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to be engaging with NASPA or ACPA, but there are other professional groups that might also support you, whether it's your housing professional groups or career service professional groups. Try to take advantage of the opportunity to engage with those professional groups. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to a conference. There may be other ways for you to do that, to contribute to the knowledge. Maybe you want to do an article or do presentations or engage in webinars. Whatever you can do to engage in different professional groups, I think is going to be important to increasing your network. Take advantage of affinity groups that operate on your campus. There are often many affinity groups on your current campus because that allows you to engage on your campus. One of the things I think that we miss often in this idea of networking is we miss our own space. We miss the opportunity to network within our own organizations, within our own systems. So utilizing systems on your campus to network with colleagues inside your department or across campus is significant. When you have an opportunity to meet professionals who are in other departments within student affairs or within other academic units or other organizations like facilities, that's important. Your network is also something that will help your career, but it also might help you in your job that you're doing. To be able to know people in different areas, to call on them, to ask questions for support, and to call on them about advancing your own goals that you may have for your program area or for the activities that you're trying to engage in. It's important to develop as you progress. It's important to keep in mind that your networks grow. Sometimes your networks don't grow as fast as we all would like, particularly as a graduate student. You might be thinking, how do I get this? Where do I go? And then going to a NASPA conference, it seems so large. Well, there's always opportunities for you to, meet smaller groups of people that either are in the same position that you're in or might be at the same campus that you're at. Smaller groups of people to progress your career. And you also, in your quest to increase your network, might want to identify your allies and the experts that you have on your campus. It's really important to identify people who will support the work that you have and the work that you're going to do, as well as to be able to have people, professionals, who are experts in their field, to be able to call upon your experts to identify how are you going to progress with some of the things that you want to do. How do you get those goals accomplished? How do you make a program about X, Y, and Z? Being able to tap into a network of experts is really critical, because then you're able to learn. You're able to learn and to grow, and then to produce different programs and services for your unit. But then you're also learning as a professional when you get to connect with those who might be your allies and those who might be experts. Be visible and engaged. Networking is an easy thing to do when you're an extrovert. So it's easy to do if you're a person like myself, who I love people, I like to meet people, I like to engage wherever I can be, and I like to be out there and engaged. We had a couple of years ago, one of my departments in fraternity and sorority affairs had a graduate assistant, Raven, who was really good at being visible and engaged. So I'm going to do a shout out to her, because she was excellent in terms of meeting people and being engaged. So easy to do if that's your nature. If that's not your nature, then you're wondering, well, how do I become visible and engaged when I'm more of an introvert and I don't really like to do that? But to kind of think about how can you be a part of different networks, that you don't necessarily have to be, out there, that one person out there. But when you are a part of different affinity groups, you're engaging. You might be able to meet people who might be able to connect you to different ideas, to different people, to different information, different knowledge that help you to grow. So being visible and engaged, I think, is really important. And then finally, just to reiterate, developing connections across your current campus is important. It's also important to develop those connections outside of your campus as well, to be able to maybe facilitate workshops with another person, to present with someone allows you to increase your network. Going to different institutes helps to increase your networks. I remember going to my first interfraternity institute, my first year in the profession, and I was able to meet other professionals whom I've stayed in contact with all along. We roomed together for other conferences. We were able to develop networks because we were new, and we were also had some common themes in our job. So we're working with fraternities and sororities. And so to be able to connect with others on your campus, off campus, is going to be important. So I'm going to take a pause because I want you all to think a little bit about identifying maybe 2 to 4 people that can help you grow, to help you grow in your network. What do they do that you would like in the future? So think about 2 to 4 people that you might be able to tap into that are going to assist you in your own professional growth, that are going to assist you in increasing your network. And then think about, when you're thinking about these 2 to 4 people, what do they do? What are they doing? What do you see them doing? And is that something that you would like to do in the future? So not just about the jobs that they have, but how do they operate within your organization? How have you seen them operate elsewhere? So let's take a moment to think about that. Okay. So once we have talked about our networks and we've identified some strategies around networking, we want to ask some critical questions about, we've done our skills, so we know what skills that we need to navigate our career, what's going to be important, and we've talked about our networks. Everyone then asks this fundamental question, so what do I do about pursuing the PhD? That's a question that we all ask at some point in our careers as we're trying to think about moving forward. I like to think that there are some critical questions that we should ask before we make the automatic jump to getting a PhD. First and foremost is identify the end. How do you envision your career? What do you want to do? How does, or maybe, how does a PhD fit into that? Do you need a PhD to do what you envision you want to do in your career? Or do you think that you might need a PhD if you want to eventually end up as a Chief Student Affairs Officer? Or maybe you think that maybe getting a PhD, I might be able to join the faculty. And those are all really good questions to ask about pursuing the PhD. Sometimes it's easier to say, I'm going to go from getting my master's degree to getting a PhD. It's an easy conversation to have in the beginning. And for me, as a grad student who moved into her first position, the theme of my conversation with people was, oh yes, I'm going to work for a couple of years, and then I'm going to pursue my PhD, and then I'm going to become a vice president of student affairs. And I think almost everyone in my program probably had the same conversation. We just, that was the routine. That's what we said. And what I wasn't able to do early on was to kind of really think critically about it. I did start to think critically about it as I was working through my own PhD program, and it was very enlightening to me as I started to think differently about some of the things that I could do with my PhD that didn't always end up at being the Chief Student Affairs Officer. So I think that the first step in pursuing the PhD, and we always ask that question as we're trying to determine how our careers are going to unfold and how we want to navigate them, is to identify what is the end that we have in mind. What do we think we might end up doing? What is that envision? And taking the time to really assess that. Maybe in our minds we're thinking we might be scholar practitioners, and that's a very good opportunity for people to identify a use for their PhD that doesn't necessarily include being a Chief Student Affairs Officer, but it's an opportunity for you to contribute to the field, to be able to contribute the knowledge. And a lot of people like that idea of, I could use my PhD to work in assessment. I could do a PhD to continue being a practitioner while also contributing knowledge around certain areas of my expertise, areas of my specialization. That's a very real consideration, and I ask people to consider that as you're thinking about pursuing your PhD. The other element to think about is it full-time or part-time? What are the full-time versus part-time considerations to pursuing your PhD? Inevitably, you'll have to make a decision as to, do you decide to just go full-time back into it, and what the costs and the benefits of that are going to be, versus what are the costs and benefits of going part-time. Every decision, whether to do full or part-time, really comes with a conversation around costs and benefits. A lot of professionals think that the benefit of doing full-time is time. You can get that done quicker. And then, of course, part-timers often believe that, well, I can still continue my position, my career, my job, while also pursuing my work on my PhD. I was one of those individuals who pursued my PhD part-time. So I worked professionally, while I was also working on my PhD. And there were times where that was a great decision. And then there were times I said to myself, oh goodness, I really wish I was just doing this full time so I can commit full time to the work and then get done with it faster so I can move on. But that kind of fits my personality where I'm like, I'm trying to move forward. I'm always ever moving forward. And so those were the conflicts that I had with inside of me at the time. But I chose part-time and that was a good decision for me. And everyone has to ask that fundamental question, full-time or part-time, what are going to be the costs and what are going to be the benefits of each of those decisions? The other aspect of pursuing the PhD that I highly recommend is to think about the availability of mentors and coaches. The mentoring and the coaching that you're going to be receiving while you're working on your PhD. I think that it's very important to have that as you're thinking about your PhD, as you're working ahead, because you need to be able to find out what systems of support that you may have. How will you hold yourself accountable, and what support systems will help you be accountable? Moving through the PhD process starts off as a group process because you're with a cohort, and then it ends as with an individual method because you're just writing your dissertation and you're doing that by yourself. And to be able to identify your mentors and your coaches and the availability of them is one thing, an aspect that you should consider in terms of whether or not you should pursue, when you should pursue, and how you should be pursuing your PhD. And then another consideration to have is time and family implications. How long is it going to take for you to get the PhD done? What are going to be the impacts on your family if you have a family to consider? What about time travel if you do a remote PhD, if you are doing an online PhD program? What are going to be the impacts on your time? If you're going to do it part-time, then you have to consider how is that going to impact your work? The time that you have to give to your job, the day-to-day of your job, and being a rock star at your job, and then how will the time of working on your coursework or even writing your dissertation, how will those impact your work? So lots of things to consider, but they're thoughtful items. They're things that everyone should take pause and think about. Whether or not it's for you is really about where you want to end up. Once you make that decision and if it's yes, then you should think about what do you want to do with it? And then will you do it full or part-time? And what are going to be the costs and benefits associated with that? And how will you have support? Key things, very important things to consider. Another component that I wanted to focus on about our career paths and trying to figure them out. Another item in our toolbox is preparing for the next position. So it really it's once you think about your skills, once you think about your network, whether you're going to add your PhD to what you're going to do, inevitably it's time to think about, well, what is my next position? What is it that I want to do? And I have always shared an exercise with my staff and with students that I often interact with or in classes that I've been able to teach about doing it's the Chronicle Exercise. And I do this still myself. I look through the Chronicle, I see what might be an aspirational position, and then I kind of figure out, okay, these are going to be some things that I'm going to need. Or this sounds really interesting. Through thinking about it that way, I've been able to identify a couple of things that I think make it really easy in terms of preparing for the next position. What are you going to be doing next? I should also caution to say that as you're in a position now, it's not always you're thinking about the next position. But you will eventually have an opportunity to prepare for what that position is going to be. So first, I always ask my staff and colleagues to identify what your current skills are. Be honest about your abilities. What can you do and do very well? And what do you need to work on? So early on in our talk this morning, I asked you to think about your stretch goals, to think about things that you wish you could, grow in. So I'm going to come back to that in this bullet here and tie it into, it's about your current skills. You should be able to identify what your current skills are. What are your abilities? What are you really good at? And then what do you need to grow in? Preparing for the next position starts with identifying what you have in your toolkit right now. Then you want to be able to understand the organizational culture you are in, and then identify your ideal culture. One of the things that I think we don't do enough is to take a look around us to say, how are we operating and functioning right now? How is the organization that I'm in right now working for me and my own professional philosophy, my own professional identity, and the things that I want to be able to accomplish? And then to think about, what is your ideal place to be? That's kind of where the Chronicle exercise comes in, where you're able to look at the Chronicle and identify places, positions, skills that seem attractive, appealing, that seems like they're stretched, seems that they complement. That's a good opportunity for you to think about how you're going to move to the next job. And where you work matters. So you have to identify goals at your current position that are complete and or unmet. So often we leave positions and we haven't already accomplished all of our goals that we have wanted to do in our current position. And sometimes we leave positions and we haven't gained the skills yet to prepare us fully for the next position. So often we leave positions too soon, and then sometimes we leave positions too late. So it's trying to find a balance, because sometimes professionals get stuck in that position and they're there. And the stuck is the fact that we do get really comfortable. We like things that are going on. We like doing what we're doing. We feel great about it. And then you're there. So sometimes as professionals, we make the mistake of staying too long. And then sometimes we make the mistake of not staying long enough. So to be able to kind of figure out if you're doing the right thing is to often think every year, the time at break time, like now we're preparing for the semester to end, or the summer, to identify your goals. What were the things that you wanted to accomplish this year? What did you want to do last year? Did you have any success? What do you have that have been completed and unmet? And then to take it back to what we talked about earlier about your own professional skills and your own professional goals in your current job, making sure that you are tying in, are you accomplishing your professional goals? Are you learning? Are you growing? Answering those questions about growth, about skill development, enhancement, stretching your skills, really helps us to prepare for the next job. Then you're able to think critically about, am I taking the next job that's going to help me also pursue my PhD and then also complement my skills? Am I taking the next position because at some point after my next position I can go full-time in pursuit of my PhD, and then that allows me to still have some skills that I can grow in, that skills that I'm going to add to my toolkit that allow me to be competitive in a search once I have my PhD in hand. All of these things are very critical for you to think about in terms of preparing, but they're also critical in terms of thinking through about your career. How do you navigate your own career journey? It's your responsibility to always think about, how is your career going to progress? What do you want to do inside higher ed? Or maybe there might be other things outside of higher ed that you're thinking about. Or maybe they're on a college campus, but you'd like to move into a different specialization of student services, or a different specialization that exists on your campus. Those are important because those are things that help us to identify our plans. So what I want everyone to be able to do right now is to think about each of the components that I've outlined for you, and then think about one strategy you might want to work on moving forward into the new academic year that's going to lead to you thinking about your own career journey. So whether that is identifying stretch goals, whether it's identifying your networks, think through about what is going to be your one aspect that you're going to focus in on moving into the next academic year. Once you're able to think about that one aspect, then I think it's important for you to think about your plan. How do you move it forward? If you identify that networking is going to be one of the topics or tool or skills that you're going to work on moving into the next academic year, then sit down and think about who are your allies, who do you know, what are some of the affinity groups that exist on your campus. Asking yourselves those questions that we asked previously about networking. If you have identified that you want to start thinking about whether or not you want to pursue a PhD to advance your career, then moving forward, think about what will be the analysis of that. Or if your plan is to increase one of your skills in your toolbox, like assessment, then think about a plan about how can you enhance that skill. Is there a project that you could join that you can learn? Is there a class that you can take on your campus that allows you to get more experience in assessment? Can you join a knowledge community around assessment? Can you join other projects across campus? Might you have an informational conversation with someone in your department or division that does assessment right now? Or might you be interested in meeting with someone over in institutional research to learn more about how they do what they do? Or is there a journal, an article that you are going to peruse to learn a little bit more? Take an active step in thinking about how you're going to grow and an active step in addressing some of your plans. So at this time we have our questions. So I'm going to go over to our chat here to see if we have any questions about some of the things that I've talked about today. And feel free to type in your questions in the box. And feel free to type in your questions in the box. So I thank you. I see a pop up a question here. Questions in the box. So I thank you. I see a pop up a question here. Questions in the box. And also some comments. So thank you, Nathan, for sharing about the aspects that you enjoy in your job. So you enjoy collaborating with other departments to increase the exposure and outreach of your programs. Thank you for sharing. That you enjoy in your job. So you enjoy collaborating with other departments to increase the exposure and outreach of your programs. Thank you for sharing. That you enjoy in your job. So you enjoy collaborating with other departments to increase the exposure and outreach of your programs. Thank you for sharing. That you enjoy in your job. So you enjoy collaborating with other. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Are there any other questions or thoughts? Are there any other questions or thoughts? Well, okay. Thank you. I see that our time is approaching here. We are just really pushing up to the 12 o'clock mark. Again, thank you for joining me today in the discussion about navigating our career. We will be offering more master classes in the spring that I'm very excited about that will help you continue our conversation on some skill development. So we will be doing a master class around cultural competencies. We are going to be doing a master class around navigating and networking within conferences because that's we recognize that's a really big deal. And how do you do that, particularly if you're planning to attend the annual meeting in Philadelphia. And then we also will be doing a master class on increasing some of your skills in your toolkit, as well as talking about placement and preparing for that. So again, thank you for joining us today. I do appreciate your time. Again, enjoy your break if you have some fantastic plans. Do amazing things to take time off and to get re-energized for a new semester, to come back at it, to work for all of our students to make their experiences meaningful. Again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. Enjoy your break. Happy holidays.